Welcome to Dark Deeds and Conspiracy, the podcast where we delve into chilling true crime stories and mysterious conspiracies that have left us questioning everything. Thank you for joining us today as we explore another dark chapter in history.
Okay, so today we're going deep, really deep, into a case that I think is going to stay with us for a while.
Yeah, this one's definitely chilling.
We're talking about Israel Keyes.
Ah, Keyes. A name that sends shivers down your spine, right?
Absolutely. And, we've got this stack of articles, documents, all about him. And I'm hoping we can kind of unpack, what made him so different, so effective at staying under the radar for, over a decade?
More than a decade, yeah. And what continues to make him such a source of fascination and fear even today.
Right, exactly. And we're not just going to skim the surface here. We want to really understand his methods, his background, how it all came together.
The why, not just the why.
Yes, the why. Because the what is, frankly, terrifying enough on its own.
It really is. And one thing that your sources make very clear is that Keyes just didn't fit the typical profile of a serial killer. He was meticulous, adaptable, almost like a ghost, really. He really threw a wrench in a lot of the patterns that law enforcement usually relies on.
Yeah, let's start with the basics for anyone who might be, just tuning in to this deep dive. Israel Keyes, born 1978, died by suicide in 2012 after being captured. And one of the things that's, immediately disturbing is just how far-reaching his crimes were.
Oh, absolutely. The geographic spread alone is staggering.
He admitted to at least 11 murders, and that's just the ones we know about, across the entire U.S. And he used these kill kits.
Right, the kill kits, they're almost like a chilling signature. And a real window into his planning process, the way he would pre-position these things.
Years in advance.
Years. He was thinking ahead, setting the stage, and then he could just, boom, appear anywhere, commit a crime, and vanish.
Like he was never even there. It makes it so hard to connect the dots when you're looking at cases across multiple states.
You're not looking for a pattern in the moment. You're looking for a pattern that was set in motion years ago.
It's a whole other level of premeditation.
Absolutely.
So let's go way back to his childhood. It seems like, it wasn't exactly a normal upbringing, was it?
Not by any stretch of the imagination.
Large family, deeply religious, involved with the Christian identity movement, which, if folks aren't familiar, it's pretty extreme.
White supremacist, anti-Semitic, a whole bunch of really dangerous ideology wrapped up in there.
Yeah, and then add to that, they lived in, serious isolation, rural Washington state, off the grid, homeschooled.
Isolated physically, ideologically. It's a recipe for, it begs the question of how it shaped his development.
His worldview.
Exactly. How much did that contribute to a sense of being different from, maybe even hostile to mainstream society?
And then you throw in this connection to the Kehoe family.
Right, the Kehoes, that's a chilling detail. Convicted of triple murder, that level of violence, close to home like that. It makes you wonder about the messages he was absorbing, the normalization of extreme behavior.
Right, and even as a kid, there are these red flags, I guess you could call them. Animal cruelty, violent urges, even fantasies about murder. And he confessed to his first sexual assault as a teenager.
Yeah, that's not, typical teenage angst or rebellion. That's something much darker.
And it's hard to dismiss it as, he was just a troubled kid.
It speaks to a capacity for inflicting harm that was already there.
And then it seems to escalate from there. Substance abuse in adolescence, further social isolation.
Like he was testing boundaries, pushing further and further away from, what's considered acceptable.
And then he joins the Army, 1998 to 2001, serves at Fort Hood, Fort Lewis, even in Egypt.
Now, you might think that military service, with all its discipline and structure, might have had a grounding effect.
Right, straighten him out.
But some of your sources suggest it might have actually done the opposite.
Made him more focused.
Focused, organized, maybe even desensitized to violence. Remember, he was described as quiet, introverted, but also had a history of heavy drinking. So you have this potential for his fascination with violence being almost legitimized in a way.
And you see that escalation. During this period, he starts committing burglaries, arson.
It's like his criminal activity is taking on a new level of, kind of dark sophistication.
So then he leaves the military, moves to Nia Bay, Washington, starts working construction, and this is around 2001, which is when the first known murder occurs.
Right, and this is also when the kill kits become a central part of his MO. He's not just reacting in the moment, he's planning things out years in advance.
Hiding these kits all over the country.
Like a spider web, you know?
Yeah.
Just waiting for a fly to land.
And his victim selection is just so random. No specific type, no clear connection to him. He'd travel huge distances, pick someone, and just disappear.
The randomness is what makes it so terrifying, so hard to predict. Traditional profiling goes out the window.
It's like he was playing a game, but the stakes were people's lives.
And he was playing to win.
So let's talk about the psychology behind all of this. What kind of person does this?
Well, the sources point to psychopathy, a lack of empathy, this ability to compartmentalize, to control his urges in everyday life, but then have these intense, violent needs that he has to satisfy.
And no remorse. It's like he viewed these crimes as separate from his real life.
Detached, almost clinical.
But not entirely, because he seemed to enjoy the deception, the manipulation.
Oh, absolutely. The thrill of being two people, of outsmarting the authorities, that was a big part of it.
So to really understand his methods, let's look at some of the specific cases, like Bill and Lorraine Currier, Essex, Vermont, 2011. They were kidnapped from their home, driven to an abandoned farmhouse. Bill was shot, Lorraine sexually assaulted and strangled, and their bodies were never found.
In the chilling detail, he had a kill kit stashed near their home 2 years before he even chose them as victims.
2 years. I mean, that level of planning is just mind-boggling.
It shows a patience, a detachment that's hard to comprehend.
And then there's Samantha Koenig, Anchorage, Alaska, 2012. Kidnapped from a coffee stand, forced to withdraw money, sexually assaulted, murdered. And he kept her body for days, set to ransom demand with a staged photo, before dismembering her and dumping her in Matanuska Lake.
That case is heartbreaking, and it's the one that ultimately led to his capture.
Because he used her ATM card.
Right, a seemingly small slip-up in his otherwise meticulous plan.
And then you have Deborah Feldman, Providence, Rhode Island, also in 2012. Allegedly murdered while he was traveling. Her body was never found. Details are scarce, but it was linked to him through his confession and things they found on his computer.
In that case, it really highlights the challenge of trying to piece together the full scope of his crimes.
Because we might never know all the victims.
Exactly. He was deliberate in his vagueness, even when he confessed.
Speaking of the kill kits, let's talk about what was actually in them. Because it's more than just, weapons.
Oh yeah, this wasn't just a gun and some rope. We're talking guns, ammo, knives, duct tape, shovels, even cleaning supplies.
Like a twisted version of a camping kit.
But for murder.
Yeah.
And it allowed him to be completely self-sufficient, no need to buy anything locally, no trace.
He was a ghost.
He was a ghost.
The investigation and confession process, it sounds like it was, frustrating, to say the least.
Oh, absolutely. He was cooperative to a point, would give some details, but then clam up, refused to say more.
Almost like he was toying with them.
It was a power play. He was still in control.
He confessed to 11 murders, but there were inconsistencies, gaps in his stories.
He was very careful to be vague, which makes it even harder to know the full truth.
And then his suicide in December 2012, that pretty much brought everything to a halt.
It was the ultimate act of control, wasn't it? Taking the secrets with him.
So let's try to sum up some of the key things we've learned about Keyes. From a psychological standpoint, it seems clear he was a psychopath.
Oh, without a doubt. The lack of empathy, the planning, the complete lack of remorse.
And then you have the impact of his childhood, the isolation, the extremist ideology he was raised with.
It's hard to say how much that directly shaped his actions, but it certainly created a context for his detachment, his alienation from mainstream society.
And then his methodology, the kill kits, the travel, the random victim selection, it all adds up to this ability to essentially disappear.
He was a master of blending in, of leaving no trace.
And for law enforcement, I imagine this case was a huge wake-up call.
It really exposed the limitations of traditional profiling. When you have someone like Keyes who's so mobile, so random, it forces you to think outside the box.
And to work together. You need cooperation across jurisdictions, information sharing. It's not just a local case anymore.
Right. It becomes a national, even international issue.
And we can't forget about his family background. That extreme religious environment, the isolation, it's all part of the picture.
And it makes you wonder how many others like him are out there. People hiding in plain sight.
That's a terrifying thought.
It is. And then you have his personal life. He had a girlfriend. He worked construction. He seemed normal.
But underneath it all, there was this darkness, this capacity for such calculated cruelty.
And that ability to compartmentalize, to separate his crimes from his everyday life, that's what makes it so unsettling.
He talked about boredom being a motivator. Boredom.
It's a chilling thought, right? Like human life was just a way to pass the time.
In the aftermath of all of this, it's still ongoing. The search for other victims, the fact that he might have killed many more than he confessed to.
His suicide left so many questions unanswered, so many families without closure.
And for criminal profiling, it's a game changer. You have to consider that there might be others out there like him, operating outside the known patterns.
It forces you to be more flexible, to look for the unexpected.
And the public's fascination with Keyes, it's understandable, right? This idea of someone who can be so normal and yet so monstrous.
It challenges our sense of how we judge people, how we identify danger.
So we know he confessed to 11 murders, but there's a real possibility, isn't there, that he killed many more?
Oh, without a doubt. There's so many unsolved cases, missing persons, that couldn't be linked to him.
And your sources really dig into this. His confessions were vague, contradictory at times, but there are hints, timelines that don't add up.
And his travel records? He was all over the place. It widens the net considerably.
There's even speculation about potential influence from other serial killers, like Gary Ridgway, though there's no concrete evidence of that.
It's certainly possible that he studied other killers, drew inspiration from them. But with Keyes, it's hard to know for sure. He was so secretive.
But there are some specific cases that stand out, like Kiana Okami disappeared in Hawaii in 2007.
Right, and we know he traveled to Hawaii.
Then you have all the unsolved disappearances in Washington state, women going missing throughout the 2000s, cases like Sarah Hansen.
He was active in Washington for a long time. Those cases definitely warrant a closer look.
And missing persons cases in Alaska, particularly in remote areas, going back to the late 90s, early 2000s.
Alaska's a vast state, lots of places to hide a body.
And he definitely had a preference for isolated locations. That's a recurring theme.
It minimizes the risk of witnesses, makes it harder to find the victims.
And those gaps in his confessions, the periods where we don't know what he was doing, who he might have met.
It's chilling to think about what might have happened during those times.
And then there are the cases from his past, from his hometown of Colville, Washington, like Julie Murray Harris, 12 years old, disappeared in 1996.
I remember that case. He was questioned, but never charged.
And then the Emerson case, also in Colville, 1997, a mother found murdered in a burned trailer, her daughter missing, later found dead.
Awful case. And Keyes admitted that his first arson was a trailer in Colville.
Hard to ignore that connection.
Very hard. It suggests his violent tendencies might go back even further than we know.
And then he confessed to 5 unidentified victims in Washington state between 2001 and 2006. Gave some details, burying one in a lake, a young couple he killed, 2 others in separate incidents, but no names, no specific locations.
Just enough information to be frustrating, to know that those victims are out there, but we might never find them.
And an unidentified victim in New York State around 2009. Another confession, another dead end.
It's like he wanted to leave these little breadcrumbs, these hints of his crimes, but never enough to solve them.
And then you have the Boca killer cases, Boca Raton, Florida, 2007, the abduction and murder of Randy Ann Melitz-Gorenberg, the kidnapping of a woman and her toddler, and the murders of Nancy Bochicchio and Joey Bochicchio-Hauser.
Those cases were terrifying. And the description of the suspect in the kidnapping, it sounds a lot like Keyes.
He was known to be in Florida around that time.
It's definitely a strong possibility that those are Keyes victims.
And then finally, there's James Jimmy Lamar Tidwell Jr., disappeared in Mount Enterprise, Texas, 2012, which is right around the time Keyes was captured in Texas.
Right, and there was that bank robbery in Azle, Texas, that the FBI believes Keyes committed.
And the robber was wearing a hard hat similar to one Tidwell owned, and a dark wig that Keyes admitted was made of human hair.
The timing, the location, those details, it's very suggestive.
It all adds up to this really disturbing picture of a killer who was operating with, impunity for years.
And it makes you wonder, how many more victims are out there that we just don't know about?
So we've talked about his crimes, his methods, but let's go back to his fascination with other serial killers. Your research shows he had a whole library of books about murders, true crime.
Oh, he was a student of the macabre? He read everything he could get his hands on about serial killers.
And he really identified with the killer in Dean Koontz's novel Intensity.
Right, that book really resonated with him. It's about a psychopath who targets random victims, which is, well, pretty much Keyes' MO.
He also studied Johnny Douglas's Mindhunter, which is, written by one of the FBI's top profilers.
He was fascinated by the psychology of these killers, the ways they operated, the ways they evaded capture.
And he idolized Ted Bundy, saw himself as similar in some ways.
He even tried to escape from custody, just like Bundy did. It's like he was trying to live up to some kind of twisted ideal.
But at the same time, he really didn't want media attention for his own crimes. Said he didn't want to be a copycat, wanted to protect his family.
It's a strange contradiction, isn't it? He admires these notorious killers, but he doesn't want that kind of notoriety for himself.
He even called Dennis Rader, the BTK killer, a wimp for showing remorse.
He had no respect for killers who got caught, who broke down and confessed. He saw them as weak.
He admired Robert Hansen, the butcher baker who hunted women in Alaska.
Another example of his preference for isolation, for preying on the vulnerable.
But he only had a mild interest in someone like James Holmes, the Aurora shooter.
It seems like he was drawn to killers who were methodical, who planned things out, who were able to evade capture for a long time.
It's like he saw himself as part of some elite club of serial killers.
A very dark and twisted club.
So, thinking about his capture, it's kind of ironic, isn't it? After all that careful planning, all those precautions, he gets caught because of a ransom demand.
He wanted to play mind games, to taunt the authorities, but it backfired.
They were able to track the ATM withdrawals, and then it was just a matter of time.
And ultimately, he was arrested during a traffic stop, a routine traffic stop.
Can you imagine this guy who's been so careful, so meticulous, gets caught because he didn't signal a lane change or something?
It shows you that even the most cunning criminals can make mistakes.
And during the interrogation, he tried to play it cool, said he just happened to have Samantha Koenig stuff. It was all a coincidence.
He was buying time, trying to figure out his next move.
But eventually he confessed to her murder and to others. And he apparently wanted a quick execution, didn't want any more publicity.
He wanted to control the narrative, even in defeat, to go out on his own terms.
He even tried to escape during a court hearing.
He was a fighter, even to the end.
And then there's the fact that the FBI is keeping part of his file secret, citing national security.
What could be in there that's so sensitive?
They say it's related to his military background, his interest in explosives, possible extremist ties.
It makes you wonder if there's a whole other dimension to this story that we'll never know about.
And his suicide, it was brutal.
A razor blade hidden in his cell. He went out the same way he lived, in control, on his own terms.
He left a suicide note. They described it as an ode to murder.
Disturbing.
No clues about other victims, but there were drawings found under his bed. 11 skulls and a pentagram.
The FBI thinks the skulls represent his victims.
It's a chilling final message.
It's like he's taunting us from beyond the grave.
So the big question remains, how did he get away with it for so long?
It's a combination of factors, really. He had no prior criminal record for violence.
No red flags popping up on anyone's radar.
He was incredibly meticulous in his planning. The kill kits, the travel, the random victim selection, it all made him almost impossible to track.
No connection to his victims, no witnesses, and he was very careful to avoid leaving behind any forensic evidence.
He was like a ghost. He knew how to operate in the shadows.
So as we wrap up this deep dive into the truly terrifying world of Israel Keyes, what have we learned? What are the big takeaways here?
I think the biggest lesson is that there are people out there who are capable of unthinkable evil, and they can be hiding in plain sight.
People who don't fit the traditional profiles, who are smart, adaptable, and ruthless.
Keyes was a master manipulator. He knew how to blend in, how to present a normal facade to the world while secretly committing these horrific acts.
And his case highlights the limitations of our systems, the challenges of catching someone who's operating across state lines, who's leaving no trace behind.
It forces us to rethink how we approach criminal profiling, how we investigate these kinds of crimes.
And it leaves us with this unsettling feeling that there are probably more victims out there that we just don't know about.
That's the hardest part to accept. The families who are still searching for answers, who may never know what happened to their loved ones.
Keyes' suicide robbed them of that closure, and it robbed us of the chance to fully understand his motives, the true extent of his crimes.
He's gone, but the shadow of his evil lingers.
So as we end this deep dive, I'm left with this question. Given Keyes' meticulous planning, his ability to blend in, his deliberate randomness, what does his case tell us about the potential for other offenders like him to be out there undetected, waiting for their moment?
It's a terrifying thought, but it's one we have to consider. Keyes was a monster, but he wasn't unique. There are others out there just like him.
And it's a truly sobering thought. Thanks for joining us for this deep dive. It's been an experience.
It certainly has.
We'll be back next week with another deep dive into, well, let's hope it's a slightly less disturbing subject.
Agreed. I could use a break from the darkness.
Thanks for listening to Dark Deeds and Conspiracy Podcast, and be sure to subscribe for more episodes on true crime mysteries just like this one. Until next time, stay curious, stay safe, and always keep searching for the truth.